Testing, testing, testing. JB here. JB here. Hope everybody's doing outstanding. April 24th, 2024. 1 second here. Just going to talk, like I always do, about the markets, talk about some of the individual names, some news, earnings today and tomorrow, and go from there. We'll get right into it here. Take a look at the markets. The SPY is back under that 504.50 area. Let me see if I can pull up my chart because I don't have it up right now. And let's see, let's hang on a second. Yeah, so the SPY's down about a 1/4%. And we already had a big rally. S&P was up 2% so far this week. So a little consolidation, I guess, is not to be unexpected. But of course, I would love to see the market melt up. Probably maybe 512 or so would be a nice area to get by the end of the week. Not much in the way of news or catalyst. I put it on the watch list and I talked about it yesterday. I think some of the simmering and the tensions over the Middle East have kind of helped markets. There hasn't been much in the way of catalysts outside of that. Tesla reported earnings after the close yesterday. I mean, you'd have to think it was going to be disappointing. So they did report a miss, and then you see everybody on FinTwit saying, "Why is it moving higher?" A lot has to do with Musk, and Musk is always, when he's on the conference calls, people who haven't listened to conference calls always say he mumbles or just don't really understand him, and it's tough to understand him. But he laid out his vision a little better, a little clearer, and I think that allayed concerns, especially on the analyst side. I was talking about Tesla in the afternoon yesterday around the calls. I said, wow, it's typically you don't see they're not too far on the money calls on Tesla to be this inexpensive. Sure enough, those would have paid, but you would have had to lock them in quick because the stock is reversed from highs. But it's not. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's time for the bull run to restart in Tesla. But certainly, maybe it found somewhat of a short-term bottom. He talked about stock buybacks and things like that. So those earnings, they didn't hurt the markets. The market was gapping higher this morning. Overnight, Asia rallied over 2%. Europe stocks were in the green, and it just seems just like a meltdown. Not a meltdown, but like a slow, methodic sell-off from the highs we hit at about 10 o'clock. And those highs we hit were the overnight highs. 507.63 was the highs we hit overnight on the SPY, and that's kind of where we ramped up after the open, tested that, and then we've been kind of like in a melt-off ever since. SPY is down $3 off the highs. Still constructive here. I think we can get back over 504.50. We have Meta after close today. Tomorrow's Microsoft and Google, Intel. Those names, if they report inline numbers or at least somewhat not too bad results, some decent guidance, I think that would bode well into the end of the week. So that's the markets. Let me talk about some of the names here. And first on my mind is RILY. So SE Ltd rallied on Monday after my calls expired on Friday, over $60. I think it was 61.80 Monday, about 30 minutes into the open. So my calls would have been up quite a bit. So those expired. And then what happened on Friday as well, I had the 30 strikes. I locked some of those in on the last squeeze. And then I added 35s, and then those expired on Friday. And then sure enough, what happens this morning, RILY comes out and files their 10K. So I already kind of did my rant about this a couple weeks ago. I don't want to get too much into it, but there's a whole contingent of folks who seem to band together and attack and short a name. And there's been a couple over the last couple of years. And the newest one is this RILY. And RILY's, it's pretty much a boutique financial firm. They do asset management. They help people get financing for buyouts, things like that. But supposedly, based on what the shorts have been saying, it's a fraud. It's going to zero. They have all these shenanigans going on behind the scenes that aren't being shown transparently. I don't get it. Again, I talked about this before. It's like a 25-year-old company. It's publicly traded for 17 years, meaning there's 68 quarters of financials of 10Ks and 10Qs. They have auditors. They have a CFO. All these folks, your reputation, not only that, legality wise, you put yourself in the crosshairs of being either civil suits, uh, actual going to jail kind of situations, right? Enforcement cases. There's all those things that go into a fraud. So to go and blatantly say this company that does over $1 billion in revenues is a fraud, and all the people involved and these shorts attack every single one of their directors anybody they can find their LinkedIn profile, they dox all these people and they just attack them. And I looked at it, I said, I mean, there's certainly, they might not be a squeaky clean company, but they sure as heck are not a zero. So got the calls last time, and the people involved in this have a history of some shady stuff, right? So I'm not here to throw stones, right? I'm here to trade companies and stuff. But the people who short the name, one of the main figures involved was part of a big naked short scandal many years ago with Overstock.com, right? And that got settled out of court because Overstock.com filed a lawsuit against these folks who shorted the company publicly, did the same playbook they're doing right now with RILY, bashed the company, bashed the CEO, call him crazy, call him this, call all that stuff. And the stock actually sold off. And to the point where Overstock had to put in their press releases, we have a naked short alert to the SEC. And now there's naked shorting rules in effect, more so than there was in the past. The RegSHOlist, things like that. But he had to do a deposition for the lawsuit. And in the deposition, they have recordings and messages and emails where he's asking people at Goldman Sachs, why is it showing up on the RegSHOlist, which is the list that comes out every day that shows stocks that have shares that haven't been delivered, meaning someone sold the stock and then in the 3 settlement day period did not get those shares, right? They didn't have the shares to sell. So it's called a failed to deliver. So when you're on that list, that means that there's someone who sold the stock that possibly didn't own the shares, which would be a naked short, meaning they're selling shares they don't have. That's what they were doing with Overstock. You could see it in the deposition. That's what they did, but they settled. So there was no, um, it didn't come to it. Technically speaking, it didn't happen. They can still dispute and say, I never naked shorted, even though they did. And now they're doing it again, and they did it again with RILY. 75% short interest. They were still short in the stock. It came up on the RegSHOlist, and all based on their attacks. No facts, no any of that. But these people are so heck bent on destroying these companies that if you post on FinTwit or whatever, I actually fear, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, I put on a watch list. I fear that they'll come out. I'll wake up one day, I'll be knocking my door, and someone's there. So it's not worth it for me to get that far involved. So I just kind of keep this in the chat room and on the watch list. And when I see opportunities, that's what I do. And unfortunately, I missed this opportunity. So in a nutshell, the 10K finally came out this morning, pretty much refuted all the bear case. Although they did say there's a possibility that in the future there could be a situation that might have a material impact on earnings. But to me, it doesn't mean it's going to zero, right? So even if that's the case, and again, that's not a squeaky clean company, there might be some situations there, but then you fire people, then you get rid of directors, you get rid of the CEO, whatever, but the company's not going away, right? So anyway, you see it rallying here today, and then you still have the bears coming out saying, "Oh, in the 10K, it's bringing up we are correct about our short thesis, whatever." I'm like, no, they're not, but they're hanging on to a thread, and I would not be surprised. You see some of the pressure here that they're continuing to short the names at higher prices. They're like, oh, let's average our position, but we'll have to see how that plays out. I was looking to possibly get calls on a break over 30. I'll probably wait for now. The premiums were too expensive. It doesn't make sense to chase after it here. But this could be one of those squeeze situations, especially the longer it goes. It costs, I think it's like 25% interest to borrow the shares. I mean, I guess if you're borrowing the shares, if you're just naked shorting, you're not paying interest, right? So we'll have to see how that plays out. I'll continue to watch that one. But then on the flip side, I posted in the chat room too, the same contingent of shorts is short Trupanion. And Trupanion's been one of my top 5 stocks many years ago. It went from where it is now, 20s and 30s, all the way up to 100, or maybe went to $200. And now it's back here in the 20s and 30s because they say it's a fraud, similar to what they've done with RILY. They've been attacking the Rawlings, his name is the founder and CEO of Trupanion, the CFO. It's the same exact playbook they did on RILY, they do to Trupanion. And you look at Trupanion today, it's up 3%. And it's why? It's because number one, either they have a margin call and they got to cover their short, and they have Trupanion has a 45% short interest. And number two, maybe they're freeing up cash so they can add more to their short position on RILY. I don't know what the case is or what the story is, but I might get some calls here on Trupanion. I think it's going to squeeze. So that could be an under the radar trade. They also report earnings at the end of the month, Trupanion. So anyway, so that's my story in a nutshell. Unfortunately, I missed a trade here on RILY, but I if it stays here, all the negative, all the pieces that came out that were throwing stones of speculation have all been refuted. So there's really nothing else that they can do or say that could really hurt RILY. And the irony is they were all saying they haven't filed their 10K, they haven't filed their 10K. It's because all these shorts, they came out and they wrote letters to the company, to the auditors, to the SEC, to the point where they actually had to get an independent counsel to actually do an audit on the company, right? Because this was all this speculation was brought to their attention. So how crazy is that? Because of the shorts throwing speculation that was wrong to begin with at the company, it cost the company more money and time and the stock price to refute these allegations. So it's kind of comical how it all works. I don't understand how yeah, people can do that, throw stones, harass, intimidate, and all that fun stuff, and then there's no repercussion for them. But I guess in their pockets. But who knows? Some of these folks might be short at $40, 35. All right, so on and so forth. So that's RILY. Again, I might look at Trupanion. Don't be surprised to see me get some call. I was looking at the May 2750s and someone grabbed them for $1, and I'm not going to pay more than I'm not sure I'm going to pay $1 for some strikes. So I might look, maybe some 30s, 3250s. Those might be some strikes to play. And I've played Trupanion. I don't know if I played it in the spring, but it had a nice squeeze up into the 30s. Maybe it was the start of the year. But again, if I post on FinTwit about Trupanion, the same cohort or contingent of short people come after me. They've been following me for years since I was bullish on Tesla, and they used to come after me. That's a fraud, Tesla. And then I just stopped posting about Tesla because uh, it's not fun. So, all right. So that's my rant on RILY. Let me talk about AVAV here. Great story. And I've talked about this for the last week or two. Finally, I had some calls yesterday. They also had some news yesterday, unveiled some AI capability for their own and an autonomy kit for their unmanned drones. All good news. I hate when folks use the AI buzzword, but I think it's meaningful here with AVAV because there's been concerns around drones and their ability to function on the battlefield, especially in Ukraine. So I think that bodes well for them. You see the stock all the way up to 162.81 today. I locked some of my 165s for a little over 100%. I'll just hold the rest. I mean, unless it really takes a tailspin here, it's only down less than a percent with the market. I think it trades up near 170. You look at the chart, it had that big earnings move from the 130s all the way up to 185. Has since melted, now chopped around tight Bollinger Bands. I think it goes much higher in the coming days and weeks. So I'll continue to hold AVAV for upside. What else did I have here on the list that I was going to talk? DELL is unfortunately a little disappointing. So all the way down to 120. I think Easy Trader was talking about 120 as a possible bounce point. Was looking great this morning. You had Tesla announcing 60,000 AI chips from NVIDIA or going into ordering or whatever that, I forget the exact verbiage, but that only boded well. It did well for AI for NVIDIA for a bit. It has since reversed course. Same with SMCI. And same with DELL. DELL was at 26.55 right at the open, has since given back most of those gains. Needs to get like 122 or so today for that trend line to be intact that I've been talking about on DELL. So hopefully that holds up and DELL can start finally moving to the upside. Once it does, I'll look to get some June strikes to encompass earnings. Really like the DELL story. So that's that. That's DELL, AVAV, AI. I'm back in AI. I'm trying to remember the last time I was in AI. And you look at the chart, the stock, they reported great earnings. The stock was up 30% back in February, all the way up to $38. And then it's been pretty much nothing but, I wouldn't call it a bloodbath, but a meltdown all the way down to $20. So pretty much cut in half since the end of February, start of March, on really no news or catalyst. And this is another divisive name. There's I forget the person who has a big short piece, big short on them, thinks the company's garbage. I don't think that's the case, but I think there's an opportunity, especially with earnings, probably at the end of the month. So I'll probably look for some more strikes. I got some inexpensive calls. I may look to go further out into June. Also look for some inexpensive calls to play this for a move back above its 50-day moving average, which is 27.27. It's one of those similar to what happened with DELL that can move very quick, can move 20, 25% in a matter of 1 or 2 sessions. So, well, it needs a little kick. Hopefully, maybe an upgrade or something to that effect, and that can really start to get going. So that's AI. VKTX, I mean, I've been talking about the last couple of days. They have earnings after the close. Chart is still tight here. 50-day moving average is 66.52. It's trading at 66.06 right now. Uh, would have liked to get a chance to close a little bit of my calls in before earnings, but it's probably not gonna make a difference, because I think even if there's some commentary on the conference call that's not positive, or not as positive as what folks would want to hear, I still think it does well, or at least holds here. So I think the risk to the downside is extremely limited. Whereas the possibility of a catalyst, maybe they do announce NASH data after the close today, or give some updates on their studies, or give more color around their what's going on. Uh, maybe a specter of a buyout, or has companies contacted them. That comes up sometimes in conference calls. I mean, then the stock's in the 70s, 80s. So I'll continue to hold those strikes. And then again, the NASH data is out, supposed to due out anytime before the end of June. Hopefully sooner rather than later, says VKTX. Biogen reported earnings. Some of these big, and I used to trade Biogen back in the day. It used to be a lot more interesting to trade. As of late, after its Alzheimer's drug, it seems like it's just doing nothing. So it's not that fun anymore. But they reported earnings this morning, and it was a miss. But I guess they had a jump in their Alzheimer's drug in regards to revenues. And you look at the chart all the way down at the start of January, it was 260. It went all the way down to 190 last week, and it closed yesterday, I guess, at 193. And then you start looking at the chart, and here it is bouncing a little bit. Posted a chart in the chat room. It looks like you have a pincher, right? So when you have a pincher, I always talk about these pinchers when the momentum indicator and the ADX get really close together, and then they start to spread apart. Once they start spreading apart, typically you have a big outsized move to the upside. It's a bounce play, so it means it's oversold, uh, and then you have a big bounce. I was actually looking at some calls when it was sitting there around 205. I'm like, wow, maybe this gets back above 215, 220 in the coming weeks. It's not the fastest mover, so I'll probably just wait. But don't be surprised one day if you see me grab some Biogen calls for upside. I've been waiting for some of these. Well, been waiting for the entire biotech space to really take off, and maybe this is a sign that, hey, this could be the start of something for biotech into the summer. So that's Biogen. Not much to add here on the cannabis names. ACB, I think, was up 18% yesterday. CGC was up 15%, and they're both trading in the red today. But still, if you look at the long-term chart, still looks still looks decent. ACB actually looks better than CGC now, after getting up to $9 at the start of April, chopping around. I think it's only a matter of time for ACB's double digits, and CGC obviously double digits, but higher than that. So those are those names. I'm trying to think of some of the other names I'm watching. I was talking about URI, GWW, and Pool for earnings. Sure enough, URI was gapping this morning. So yesterday it gapped, I think it was 6:30 at the open. It gapped right to 6:40, and I started looking at the calls, and the premiums are insane. So I said, I'm not trading URI. And then it rallied 5% up to six. I guess it closed at 660 and change. And then this morning it was gapping again, 666, 68. Then it opens at 670, goes all the way up to 672. I'm kicking myself, and now here it is reversed, $18 to trade, 654. I'm probably going to pass on calls, but I really like GWW, URI, and Pool. They all three have earnings tomorrow. URI and GWW, that $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that was passed in 2021. I think those tailwinds are just really starting to pick up. You see that in that, my top 5 stock STRL, which I've ranted about for a little bit. I think this is all pent up. I wouldn't call it pent up demand, but it just pent up, and it's being fueled by this infusion of capital. And I think it just bodes well for these names. I was talking about Pool as well. I like Pool a lot, considering their install base has grown a lot since COVID, and that just provides recurring revenue opportunities, which are high margin. Sitting here, 375. Was actually looking at some strikes, but the spreads are insane on Pool. So if you go to look at Pool and you try and get some calls, and I talk about this a lot, it's important, especially when a stock is moving, to be able to get out, right? Because if you get in, even if the stock goes up, and you can't exit, then what's the point? And you look at the spreads on Pool, and it only has monthly strikes. There's not much in the way of liquidity, so it was like 200 calls on the open interest for the entire month of May. There's like 300 calls on the open interest for the entire month of June. So when you have that, then there's not a lot of market makers making a market on the options, and then you see the spreads, and the spreads are insane. Besides the 400 strikes, and well, closer in the money, the spreads are a little better. The 400s are 370 by 480, and it's so there's plenty of time in May to there's 23 more days left until May expiration. So there's time there. Just I don't know if I would. That's the type of risk reward. I think it might trade up to 400 post earnings. But then you look at the 410s, and the 410s are 50 cents by 370. So I mean, so that's great. Maybe you get in at 115, 120. Actually, do I have that right? 90 by 370. Well, 95. But then if you try to get in, let's say you get filled at 250 or something, but then you try to exit and you probably have to walk it all the way down and you finally get filled and probably not even break even. So I'll probably pass on those names, but I'll revisit tomorrow at the open. I'm trying to think of some other things here. AI, Biogen, RILY, Trupanion, VKTX, DELL, AVAV. I'm just hoping AVAV holds up here. And I think that's it for now. Yeah, look at Spotify. I was kicking myself yesterday for missing the earnings. And then today, tons of upgrades. All these price target upgrades. Everybody's maintains overweight, raises, and it hit 319.30 in the afternoon yesterday. And here it is at 283. So you're talking, so that's, like is that, trying to do the math in my head here. I mean, it's almost a $40 swing, right? So I, I don't see any news or catalyst for this move, and you start looking at its earnings. I think it was 272 before the day of earnings, but well, the day before. I can't believe it's given us all back. So I don't know. I mean, you look at Netflix, and Netflix reported a huge quarter, and the only reason, well, I wouldn't say the only reason, maybe Spotify has given us another example of what these streaming platform content providers are in store for in 2024. But Netflix can't seem to find its footing either. It was almost 580 yesterday at the close, and it's down nearly $20 again today. So uh yeah, I mean, is that a trend? So that's a little makes me a little nervous to see some of these reversals here, but it could just be that sector, right? So interesting stuff. I think that's it, folks. Thanks for listening. It's only 11:40 here, so I might get back on later before the close if anything else changes. Let's have a great day. Rock and roll.